Reflections with Marilyn Baker. Brought to you by Torch Trust, the Christian organisation with a vision for people with sight loss.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Reflections from Torch Trust, the show that focuses on faith and disability in today's world. I'm Marilyn Baker, and it's wonderful to have your company once more. On Reflections this week, we'll be hearing the second part of Sheila's interview with the inspirational Penny Melville-Brown, a former Royal Navy commander who lost her sight during her time serving in the Navy. Today, Penny shares with us how after losing her sight, she turned her hand to starting a company to help others getting back into work, working with the government, and how her passion for baking took her around the world. That sounds very interesting. I love baking myself. Plus, a little later, we'll have our thought for the week, which is thinking about contentment. But right now, it's time for the second part of our interview with Penny Melville-Brown OBE. We pick up our chat with Penny telling us about how after losing her sight, she created a company called Disability Dynamics, which set out to help disabled people get back into work. She's chatting with Torch Trust's Sheila Armstrong.
Well, Penny, it's quite clear that you really do not let anything hold you back. And you've created a company called Disability Dynamics. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Right. Well, this is rewind time then. So this goes back
this was before the coma.
This was well before the coma.
Right.
So back in 1999, I left the Navy, but I've been networking madly to try and find some paid work because in those days I didn't know much about anything. And I thought I wasn't going to be able to work. I had no income. I wouldn't be able to pay my mortgage and I would lose my home. And that was pretty critical stuff for me.
Yeah.
So I decided I would become, wait for it, a disability consultant.
Yeah.
On the basis of not much at all.
Well, you did have lived experience, so that was a basis.
I did have lived experience and I was a lawyer, so I was a great blagger.
Yeah, that's true. No comment.
I did work very hard to understand the law, understand what was going on. I took off uniform on the Friday. On the Tuesday, I was in my first paid work, which was a project helping disabled people to get back to work. And that has always been my driving ambition throughout my career since leaving the Navy, because I had such problems and I didn't want other people to be in the same place.
Have you found it easy to get disabled people back into work?
What I learned is there's an enormous amount about the psychology that surrounds disabled people, the sociology and the psychology. So one, it's of those individuals themselves, and two, it's about all the people around them, which, as I said before, it could be the friends and family, the employers, the medics, the benefits people, all of those people. And not many of them come to this situation of managing a disability, whether it's yours or somebody else's, without quite a lot of baggage. People don't come to it very often with open, clear minds. That's not to say they're horrible or unpleasant, but they have, I think, inbuilt prejudice is probably too strong, but resistance, because I think the D word has grown its own sort of stigma.
Yeah.
You know, when I was back in those days, I did some work with the government's Office for Disability Issues, and they talked about 2/3 of people who were covered by equality legislation as disabled people, but didn't think that they were, because they rejected that label. And I'm sure there are lots of people still doing that, and completely understandably, because why would anyone, and this is a different scenario to yours, but when you have been, I'm putting inverted commas around this, a normal person, how difficult is it to accept that you aren't anymore and now you are a disabled person? So you are being defined by your health conditions, not your personal capacity, your contribution to the world, your ambitions and aspirations. You're being defined by which bit of your body has stopped working properly or dropped off.
It's really interesting, actually. I absolutely agree with you. That this is going on all the time, and it does make it so difficult.
Yes.
Do you still have your company?
No, I closed it about 2-3 years ago. But what I learned, I was invited to become chairman of a little not-for-profit organisation called Disabilities. And that was all about self-employment for disabled people.
Oh, yes.
And what was very clear to me, and is clear from all the data, is that working disabled people are more likely to be self-employed than working non-disabled people. So it's a really very important area for anyone with a major health condition to think about. And I was working with me 2 excellent business advisors who'd had lots of experience of supporting disabled people. And we ran a project in Derbyshire and then 2 more over about 7 years in all, helping people with all sorts of health conditions to get back to work. We just put adverts in the paper and people responded to us. They were all volunteers. We took time with them because we understood that with most of these people, you have one chance. You do not want to encourage people to put their necks on the block and risk the lifestyle that they've created for themselves on some sort of fantasy. You want them to feel confident and you want them to succeed because you do not want them to have another knockback in life. So we were extraordinarily careful with them. We gave them long-term support. So it might be contact once a week for 6, 9 more months. And a lot of that contact was personal, a personal visit to somebody's home because that's where they were comfortable. And we had a very well-developed program of all the steps that they might take, which they could take at their own pace, because we were not going to be target-driven. Our clients were first and foremost. And I think the most important thing about what we did and how we did it were the outcomes for our clients. And we were achieving 40% positive outcomes. So many of them were starting their own businesses. Others went on to get jobs, and others went to some form of vocational training. And we had people who had been out of work, sometimes for years, decades, literally, and were still motivated to get back to work. And they just needed the right help to make it happen for them. And for me, that was hugely satisfying because for me, I was earning a little bit of money, not huge, but for them, it was hopefully life-changing. And we wrote lots of press releases about them and celebrated them. And it was all going extraordinarily well until the Department for Work and Pensions stopped my access to work. And that meant I couldn't work anymore. And I had years, literally 7 years of dispute with them from 2014 onwards. And they were found to have been maladministration and treating me with injustice. But by the time it was all sorted out, I hadn't been able to work. I couldn't take that level of risk with the contracts that I was running for local government and other people. You just couldn't take that risk. And especially when I had subcontractors delivering for me. But the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman didn't accept that was risky for a blind person to take on a contract of £500,000, not knowing whether she would be able to fulfill it. So
that does sound very bad.
That's how life is. So I decided I would do something different, and I wanted to change other people's attitudes towards people like me, disabled people. So I thought, I've cooked all my life, and cooking is great for media. Perhaps people might be interested in how a blind person cooks. And I was making 50 Christmas cakes one year. How one does for friends and family. So I got my brother, who was available at the time, one of my brothers, and he came along and took videos, and they were horribly amateur, but we put them out there. And then in January 2017, I got this email saying, would you like to win $25,000 by entering this international competition for blind people?
Oh.
And I thought, well, is this a scam? And I looked into it, and it was by the Lighthouse organization, which operates in San Francisco. So I went back and said, yes, please.
Yeah, they're quite kosher. Yeah.
And so I entered the competition. And what became apparent was, for some unknown reason, it was called the James Holman Prize. And this was to celebrate an ex-Navy lieutenant who had become blind due to his service and had traveled the world and become one of the preeminent travel writers of his time, but 200 years before.
It was almost like it came round in a circle, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I could hear them ticking my boxes off and made sure that I made my application to match all the criteria. But of course, what was going to be just a nice little cooking set of videos, I couldn't do those just at home. So I contacted everybody I knew and asked them to contact everybody they knew. And so I had people all over the world offering me to support me and host me cooking, sometimes in their homes, sometimes in their towns or cities. And I ended up doing a tour of the world from San Francisco down to Costa Rica, back up to Virginia Beach in America, over to Chongqing in China, then into Australia, Kiama, Melbourne and Perth, and then Lilongwe in Malawi in Africa. And I just got back from that, which was a 2-month tour, slightly more. And which was when I went over to France and had the accident, because I was looking for some European bits for this
cuisine.
tour.
Yes.
So eventually I did get back to the UK. I did make some more videos, and I completed my project on time. I went back to San Francisco and gave a little keynote speech there. I wrote a book because it took me a long time to recover from this accident, literally 3-4 years. So I was able to write the book with all the recipes. And, since then I've been doing other things. We went into COVID soon after. So I was doing some online cookery demonstrations. I'm doing some recipes for Talking News. And I'm doing a whole range of other things, because what we haven't talked about is all the other things I do in life. So,
before we go on to them, you've got a nice snappy title for your baking. I mean, most people would say that baking blind involves putting some beads into a pastry case and doing your pastry before you stuff it with your apple pie or whatever it is going to be. But you picked up that snappy little title for your book. Is the book called Baking Blind, or is it the general name that you've used for your project?
Oh, A Cook's Tour, Baking Blind Goes Global.
Ah, yeah. So Baking Blind's a really good one, isn't it?
It is. And can I promise you that putting little beads or those little clay beans in the bottom of pastry is fatal for blind people, because you never know whether you get them all out. What I've learned to do is, instead of, and I do bake pastry blind, but I prick it all over the bottom. Then I line it very tightly with foil. That comes up over the sides, and that works perfectly. And then you just take this sheet of foil away. And you don't have to worry about whether there's the odd bean in the bottom you're going to break the teeth on.
Well, that's a really good little cookery tip that you've given our listeners. Tell me about some of the other things that you've done as well.
Well, I decided, when I left the Navy, I was going to spend about a third of my time doing pro bono work and about another third on the business and then a third on public appointments. That's when you go and advise government, and it could be locally, it could be your borough council or district council, it could be your county council, or it could be a government department. So I was doing lots of things like that. For example, I was chairman of the South East War Pensions Committee, which was all concerned with other military veterans like myself who were entitled to a war pension and making sure that they were getting the right information and then getting the right pension when they needed it. I was on the board of HMRC, which I thought was very impressive, that a government department right at the top was willing to take on a disabled person. I was chairman of the Learning and Skills Council for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So we were responsible for all the sixth form colleges and all the further education colleges across this whole area, which is huge and has a lot of them. So again, they were just seeing a blind person from rather a different perspective. So I was doing lots of things like that, but also charitable work. So I became the chairman of my local village hall and had a wonderful time there, because one of the things I love doing is building design. And I've always done building design. And I wish I'd been an architect, really. But I was able to raise the funds. And so we completely redesigned this hall internally, knocked out walls, changed bathrooms, changed kitchens, and all the rest of it. So that was really super. And I'm still life president of that. And I've worked with other charities along the way. We created a Diversity Works partnership with businesses and councils and voluntary organisations across southeast Hampshire. And it was all about getting people who were often marginalised in work back to work. And we got funding for that and created a whole training programme and a training handbook. And we were out training small and medium-sized businesses all across southeast England about how they could be more diverse in what they did to employ people. And that was really super stuff to do. And so it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It's about having a purpose in life. And purpose does not have to be about money, but money helps, But it is about having a good reason to get up in the morning. And hopefully part of that reason is about supporting other people, making their lives better, or helping to make their lives better. You can't go and, just order a life to improve.
No.
But you might be able to give them some of the tools, some of the ideas, some of the aspirations.
Yeah,
just some
stepping stones.
About what might be good. And lots of people are already busy. They have their hobbies, have their families, they have work. But sometimes there's space for just a bit more that might really make you feel rewarded at the end of the day.
Well, that's great, Penny. And we do thank you so much for coming onto Reflections for Torch Trust today. And if people want to know more about you, how can they find you?
Well, you could go to my website, which is pennymelville-brown.com, or I think there's a Wikipedia page about me. So
right,
you just do that sort of googly stuff. I have no idea. I am absolutely rubbish online, but I am out there.
Yeah, Melville-Brown has got a hyphen, hasn't it, between the Melville?
Not on the website.
Oh, no. Oh, you have to do it space up. Yeah, no spaces. Thank you so very much, and thank you for giving us all this time. And really encouraged to hear about what you've done. It's amazing. It's wonderful. Thank you very much.
It's just been fun. Thank you.
We were hearing the conclusion of our conversation with the remarkable Penny Melville-Brown OBE. If you want to read more about her story, or even find out about her baking blind cookery books, you can visit her website, pennymelville-brown.com. Time now for this week's thought, which is thinking about contentment. It's written and read for us by Malcolm Ferris.
In the summer of 1975, I fell in love with cricket. I still love the game, watching it, reading about it, listening to its old-timers reminiscing about their greatest performances. Back in 75, I'd got it really bad. I couldn't really think about anything else. As I got older, of course, I realised that there was more to life than cricket. I really enjoy my hobbies, but they will never tick all my boxes. They will never bring me permanent peace, happiness, comfort, or security. Neither will a lottery win, or the things I could buy with it. If you troll the internet, channel hop the talk shows, or just check out a high street bookshop, you'll find a bazillion routes people have dreamed up to try to find happiness. The Bible writer Paul, though, didn't talk so much about happiness, more about contentment. It's something we don't have to strive for. We don't have to compete for it. We don't have to find ways of getting more of it once we've got it, and it doesn't cost money, time, or energy. In chapter 4 of his letter to the Philippians in the New Testament, Paul writes about contentment in these words.
I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength.
We often talk these days about things that just come with the territory. Usually, when we say this, we mean something we'd rather not have to put up with. For example, the downside of something good, like having a great job, might be having to commute long distances. Or, while becoming an independent adult means relative freedom, the downside means having to pay taxes. It comes with the territory. If you trust in God, marvellous things just come with the territory, and contentment is one of them. Listen to more of Paul's words, this time from his first letter to Timothy.
Godliness with contentment is great gain.
Thank you to Malcolm for reading this week's thought on the theme of contentment. Well, that's it for this week on Reflections from Torch Trust. But before we go, let me tell you, or perhaps remind you, about the Torch Trust's introduction to becoming a sight-loss-friendly church. That's happening on the 1st of July. And then our next holiday in High Lee is taking place between the 8th and the 12th of July. That's all booked up for now, but I'm sure they'd love you to pray for them. But we'll also be at the Sight Village Central in Birmingham on the 8th and 9th of July. So do come and say hello to the team if you're visiting. If you want to find out more about any of these events with Torch Trust, you can give us a call on 01858 438 260 or email info@torchtrust.org. Until next week, from me, Marilyn Baker, God bless.
Reflections from Torch Trust.